Hey guys, my name's Thomas. I'm an amateur hardstyle producer and enthusiast from Northern Ireland. I've been producing for I've been producing for 9 years, but more taking it more seriously for about 4 years. And I say that because the first couple of years were just spent sort of messing about with Fruity Loops and not really doing any sort of production at all, not knowing what a mix down was or anything. Quite foolish. Um, I'm now producing under the name Echidna. Luckily to get signed to Dutch Masterworks in the Netherlands. I've previously released under the names Renegade System when I made trance on Bonsai Records and Renegade DJ on my own imprint, Epidemic Black. I've decided to put together a series of hardstyle tutorials and production tutorials. I say production tutorials because they're not always going to be specifically for hardstyle. Things like mixing down leads and compression and certain parts of percussion and different things, maybe arrangement. You could relate them to all genres of dance music. However, with this first one, it is specifically for hardstyle. I'm going to delve briefly into kick drums. I say briefly because if it was to go into the exact detail, this video would be about 3 weeks long, and nobody can really be bothered with that. So, what I start with is Logic. You can use Logic 9, Logic 8, Logic 10, whatever version of Logic you have. I prefer Logic 9, even though I do have Logic 10, because there are a few plugins that didn't make it onto Logic 10, likes of the Gold Verb and a few other ones that I really like. So I'm still using Logic 9. For the basis of this kick, I'm using Microtonic. A lot of people prefer Drumazon. Others use Tremor, which I admit that I use a lot myself, simply for the fact that you can really finely tune the kick into the key that you want, and you're not having to do too much editing afterwards, which will lose the tone of your kick. I find that Drumazon and to a certain extent Microtonic, the final pitch of your kick can be slightly between notes, and unless you have it exactly on the note, it's gonna be through your whole track way out. That's gonna sound weird. But in this case, I'm using Microtonic because I bought it about 2 years ago, and I've never really used it. So as a challenge to myself, I've started to use it. And it is pretty cool. There are some nice presets in it, percussion wise, for making loops. Some nice sort of basic, like a 909 in this case, which is what we're going to start off with. So let's get cracking. Say this is just a standard patch in the SC Electrific V3 file, and it's the EMBD 909A. Now I've done a bit of tweaking to it because you need to with presets. I've added a bit of distortion to it and a bit of EQ gain. There's 3.2 decibels of EQ gain and 64.64 of distortion. I will give out the exact figures to people if you want to copy them. I advise that you don't copy them and sort of use your ears. I always find using your ears is better than using exact numbers. It's better for creativity. 3.58 milliseconds of decay, but I may or may not move this up and down throughout the process. And I have the oscillator frequency on F sharp and the equalizer frequency on F sharp as well. You need to make sure that these are both the same, otherwise it's going to throw your kick out of pitch. I'm using straight sine wave for this oscillator, although you can use whatever one you want. So it just gives you a basic sort of overdriven, a nice overdriven sound, as you can see. So what I would usually do is I would start off with clip distortion straight away, and then start EQing. Now these EQs are quite weird. The golden rule is to get more distortion is to cut away, because if you start distorting too much, you're going to run out of headroom. So to create more headroom for the crunch and the distortion, you need to cut away at the low end, distort, and then add back in at the end of it. These initial EQs will be finely tuned with the end product. Gain utility, I used a mono the signal and a phase invert, so just making sure that my kick is completely mono at this stage. Using the Oxford inflator as a limiter, so that I'm not going crazy into the red. You don't want your channels going into the red. It's alright to clip the signal, but don't digitally clip it, because it will sound terrible. And then again, just a bit of phase inversion, and routing this into bus 2. So it's pretty simple on this channel. You could start throwing in your distortion and everything more on this channel here. I prefer just to keep it nice and clean and put it on the next channel. Just routing it through buses in Logic, it's dead simple, and you've loads of buses to choose from. You've 64 buses, so you're not going to use 64 channels for your kick. If you do, just bounce it out and away you go again. So into bus 1, and this is where to quote Headhunters, the die-hard EQing comes in. Now, this isn't a final kick. This is a kick is never final. It's always a work in progress. This is sort of a sound the sound I'm going for. At this stage, I like to think of what sort of kick I want. Do I want a very punchy kick, or do I want a kick with a nice resonating tail? And you sort of have to vision the kick that you want. And by cutting and boosting your EQs at this stage, you'll start to shape your kick. Right. Initially, when I started producing hardstyle, I always wondered how you can sort of vision this, and the best way to do it is, in my opinion, is to straight away on the second slot throw on some clip distortion and then start EQing behind it. So then you're starting to get that crunch coming through. Again, just using the Oxford inflator as, I'm not opening that because it'll crash, as a limiter. More clip distortion, and starting to get a crunchier noise. I'll just bring my oscilloscope in. But as you can see, with the symmetry being moved on the clip distortion, it's pushing the signal up, right up on the spectrum. And the way to even that out is by cutting the low end. Don't know why, but that's just the way it is. Secret tip for a bit more crunch is reverb, and I'm sure any reverb works, but the only one that I find works perfect for me is the gold verb, which is not in Logic 10, and it just seems to give that extra crunch. So we're starting to get a bit more of a character to the kick now. Again, it's not perfect, it's not amazing, but it is more of a trial and error and showing you how to get to the final stage. I find that at this point is more about shaping the character of the kick with EQ and distortion. And I know from experience that you can get it sounding great, and then you move a slider and another slider, and it's suddenly completely wrong and not where you want to be, but you can't remember how to get back. Now, the best thing I find with Logic is that you can copy your settings, then you can start moving about, and then you're like, oh shit, I don't know how to get it back, but you can just hit paste and it brings it back again. I find this is good practice with Logic, is to copy the audio unit, the settings, make your adjustments. If you don't like it, paste back in. If you do like it, just leave it. Also, you can use the compare, which is like an A-B function. So that's at that stage. Obviously moving your EQ is going to give different results. Also, by changing this at the very beginning is going to affect the final sound. And just don't mess it up like that. Okay, so after you've sort of got your sound, I would usually add the auto filter, which gives a bit of movement using the cutoff. You can do this with any likes of Fab Filters Volcano, or you could create your own auto filter by using two EQ plugins, one on a low pass, one on a high pass, and automating them. Oxford Inflator again as a limiter. Platinum Verb for a bit of ambience, just to fill out the kick a bit more in the high end. Gives that nice sort of, I don't know, it just gives that sound. Another EQ. Because we've cut out so much low end, you want to add in your low end again. And that's me done with this channel. Going on to the next bus, I have a gain plugin, and I would set this to mono, the kick. You can also, again, phase invert it, and it gives a slightly different sound. Some things sound better phase inverted, some things don't. It just depends. You can use this in your mix down as well. It'll, with the likes of snares and claps, sometimes you kind of lose them in the mix. A bit of phase inversion and compression on it will help bring it out in the mix as well. And again, we'll also give a different sound. Maybe a more aggressive sound, punchier low end, or just make it stand out more in the mix. Use a compressor to compress the tail of the kick. This is one from the Audio Freak tutorial that he done at the Dutch college. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure you guys will know it. Even around about 50 milliseconds of attack to let the punch through, and then compressing the tail to give more distortion. And again, a la Audio Freak, a bit crusher just to square off the waveform. as I'm not slamming the channel at the moment, the bit crusher isn't really that necessary. It's just adding a bit of character. What you can do then is you can split it up into 3 bands, create the multi-band to work on each part of your kick if you want. I don't do this. I've only set this up just to show that you can do it. If you are doing it this way, always use a linear phase EQ, because if you use a normal, just a standard EQ, you will get slight distortion at the crossover points, which you don't want. So that will separate it all out for you. As I say, I don't like doing this. It's just not my preferred method. Onto this bus, which is where the multi-band would be coming out. And I just have a bit of EQ. The kick's nowhere near finished, but it's giving you a starting point. It needs a lot more tweaking. It's too overpowered with bass, and it doesn't have a definition in the tail. I've only really started this, 31st of March I started this one. It's not a lot of progress because I have been taking a bit of a break at the moment. But it's getting there. Kicks are one of these processes that just takes so much time, and unfortunately with hardstyle you get criticised for using the same kick all the time. So ideally for practice, what I do is I just make a new kick for every time I want to make a new track, just to try and improve myself and improve my methods. So I'll save this and I'll open up a previous kick. Let's see. Which is here, which is made with tremor. And as you can see, it is a completely sort of different setup. Starting with the EQ just to cut off at the bottom. And straight in with the clip distortion. Pretty aggressive sort of clip distortion. Boosting the gain wildly. Again, some EQing of the resonant parts. Reverb. And more clip distortion. So at that stage, sounds pretty feeble. Then you're adding in more low end and boosting, cutting, and then a bit more distortion on it. Compression, auto filter. And then out with some saturation and bit crushing, EQing. You can really go to town with kicks, depending on what you want and what sort of sound that you want will dictate how you approach your kick. I hope this was of some use. I will be doing more tutorials over the next while. Screeches, leads, general mixdown, arrangement, everything else. For future ones, if you want to follow along, I tend to use Logic on Cubase 7.5. They're the only two DAWs that I really use now. Um, Fortunately, as I'm on Mac and I'm not paying for it, do not use Fruit Loops. I used to use Fruit Loops for a few years, but having learnt my trade on Cubase, I've find myself I keep going back to it. And Logic I really only use for mix downs and for making kicks, simply because the native plugins are just too good. But hopefully you've learned something, and hopefully you'll be back for some more tutorials. Keep an eye on my YouTube channel and subscribe if you want to see more. Till next time, thank you.